Now, in the swing era, in the 1930s, a couple of things happened to the drum set. First of all, the low boy, which were these two cymbals we could open and close with our foot, were now higher. So drummers can actually play them with their hands. And this gave them the opportunity to mark the basic time and the basic pulse, not only with the bass drum, now playing on all four quarter notes, but also with the hi-hat. And also they could embellish the time and play more adventurous and more syncopated figures on the hi-hat as well. The snare drum became the main punctuation of the accents of the music. But the main focus of the time and how they were keeping the time was in the hi-hat and the bass drum. And now there were more frequencies to the drums, because you had the low frequencies and the low pulse in the bass drum, and then the high frequencies further embellished with the hi-hat. Also, by the mid-1930s, a great drummer, who was the drummer from the Benny Goodman Big Band by the name of Gene Krupa, who became the first actually drum set star in the US, wanted to explore playing the so far not tunable toms, Chinese toms that drummers would attach to their ragtime drum sets. So he, together with the drum company, he designed a tunable version of those tom-toms and started to play a lot of things on those tom-toms, and actually invented a couple of grooves that became a trademark of his drumming on the tom-toms. So this here's a little demonstration of that. In the 1940s, around the Second World War and after, the new music that emerged on the jazz scene in the US was bebop. And everything changed. The way all the instruments were playing changed, and so did the drum set change. Now the music was a lot more sophisticated and involved a lot more improvisation, and the drum set had to find ways to complement better the more complicated language that the soloing instruments, the accompanying instruments were dealing with. So the timekeeping function now shifted from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal. So the spang-a-lang on the ride cymbal that most people associate jazz drumming with evolved only then, by the 1940s. Someone who was responsible for that, or mainly responsible for that, was the great drummer Kenny Clarke. So basically, what drummers used to play on the hi-hat shifted over to the cymbal, and this was still in conjunction with the bass drum, but this time the bass drum playing quarter notes had to become much softer in order to not overpower the ensemble. And it was not dance music anymore, so it didn't need that really thorough drive. So drummers started to play the bass drum in a way called feathering. That means playing so soft as if you would play the bass drum with a feather. So actually you feel it more than you actually hear it. Now the right cymbal was taking the role of the main timekeeper, and the hi-hat was now free to not just mark 2 and 4, but to also be a part of the orchestration. The bass drum also started to employ a new technique to accentuate and punctuate the time and the more sophisticated rhythmic phrases of the other instruments by a technique what they called at the time, of course it was all connected to war, called dropping bombs. So together with the snare drum that was already punctuating a lot of the syncopated figures already in the swing era, now the bass drum started to become a part of that. So jazz drumming as we know it today was only formed and completed by the late 1940s, which is more than half a century later than the drum set started to emerge. So that's why it's very important to know what happened before the 1940s and how jazz drumming and the jazz drum set was participating in the music in different ways in order to have a solid foundation of what part of the instrument has what role in the music.